This is the story of how Prince William became the legal owner of a billion-dollar private estate and used that ownership to quietly dismantle everything Queen Camilla's family had spent 2 decades building inside it. And the consequences are still unfolding. When Queen Elizabeth II died on September 8, 2022, at Balmoral Castle, 2 things happened in the same breath. Charles became king, and William, then 40 years old, became the Duke of Cornwall. No ceremony marked it, no announcement was made. By law, the moment his father took the throne, it was done. What the title actually carried was staggering. The Duchy of Cornwall sits at roughly $1.2 billion in value, covering 135,000 acres across 23 counties in England and Wales. It takes in nearly the entire Isles of Scilly off Cornwall's coast, half of Dartmoor in Devon, ancient farms, historic castles, tenant properties, holiday cottages, and centuries of carefully built financial investments. King Edward III created this estate in 1337 for his son Edward the Black Prince, who became its first ever duke. The rule Edward set down has never been altered. The estate belongs to the monarch's eldest son and heir to the throne. Nearly 700 years of accumulated history transferred in an instant, and all of it now belonged to William. By 2025, that inheritance was generating about $30 million per year for him alone. And he pays tax on it voluntarily, because the law does not even require him to understand why what he did next carries the weight it does. You need to understand what this estate represented before he owned it. The Duchy of Cornwall had been funding Charles's household for decades. That income supported his properties and funded the lifestyle he led while simultaneously carrying on the affair with Camilla that destroyed his marriage to Diana. Diana described it in her own words as making her feel like there were 3 people in her marriage, and what the world saw on camera was only the surface of what that cost her behind closed doors. Palace staff described her pulling them aside, fear swimming in her eyes, asking quietly whether she was beautiful enough. When they told her yes, she would shake her head and whisper not to lie to the princess. A woman the entire world admired could no longer see it in herself because the man she had married had made her feel invisible. Staff heard muffled crying coming from her room at 3 a.m. on many nights. And many of those nights she slept alone in a separate room from Charles, surrounded by one of the grandest buildings in the world and completely hollow inside. People close to her described her as a person slowly disappearing from within. The affair William and Harry watched consume their mother from childhood was partly funded by the very estate that now rested in Diana's son's hands, and woven into that same estate was one detail almost nobody discussed. The duchy was designed specifically so that heirs could never be financially controlled or pressured by the reigning monarch. William owning it made him financially independent of his father, independent of everyone. And that independence was about to land on Camilla's family with considerable force. For nearly 20 years, a woman named Annabel Elliot had been drawing a royal paycheck from the Duchy of Cornwall. Annabel was Camilla's younger sister. Back in 2005, she had been hired to design the interiors of duchy properties across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly, and no competitive process determined her selection. The contract came to her because her sister married the man who owned the estate. That was the entire basis of the arrangement, and for 20 years it worked exactly as intended, until the day William became her employer. But understanding why what he did next matters requires going back much further, because William's actions did not arrive from nowhere. They were a response to something that had been accumulating for a long time. Before Charles married Camilla in April 2005, William and Harry went to their father privately and made one specific request. Harry later described the conversation in his memoir, Spare. They told Charles they supported him, endorsed Camilla, and would welcome her into the family. They asked only one thing: do not marry her. Just be together, Harry wrote. A wedding, they knew, would drag their mother's name back through every newspaper in the country, and force the entire public to compare Diana to the woman who had been her husband's mistress throughout their marriage. Charles heard both of his sons out and then married Camilla anyway. To manage the public reaction, Buckingham Palace made a specific announcement. When Charles eventually became king, Camilla would be known as Princess Consort. She would not be queen. That was the stated arrangement. William accepted it, attended the wedding, shook hands, smiled for the cameras, and carried what it all meant somewhere private where it could not be seen. February 2022 changed that arrangement. Queen Elizabeth II released a message marking her 70 years on the throne, and buried inside it was a decision that shifted everything. She said it was her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. Many assumed it was an act of acceptance, even forgiveness. Those close to the Queen told a different story entirely. She was not blessing Camilla, she was managing something she feared she would not survive long enough to contain. In private, the Queen had used the word dangerous when speaking about Camilla. What she did in that message read less like approval and more like a woman trying to contain a fire she knew she could not outlast. Then came the coronation in May 2023, and the word consort disappeared entirely. Camilla became simply Queen. The exact title William and Harry had once asked their father to prevent. One source said later what many had suspected: she had never intended to settle for anything less. William had watched every version of the original agreement get rewritten, and he said nothing publicly. One source described his resentment as deep and carefully guarded. Another put it directly: William is more diplomatic than Harry. So, he has worked to disguise how he feels. But the way Camilla treated his mother has not been forgotten, and there was considerably more to remember than a title. Camilla had a specific way of operating within the family. When she wanted Charles to think less of William or Harry, she went to him privately and shaped what he heard. Royal biographer Christopher Anderson confirmed that Camilla fed Charles her assessments of his son's shortcomings when nobody else was present. She also ran the press side with the same precision. When she needed favorable coverage, stories appeared. When she needed someone else to look worse, those stories appeared just as reliably. Her team planted the false story that Meghan had made Kate cry in the days before the 2018 royal wedding. The story tore through the British press and did real damage inside the family. Everyone in the palace knew it was false. Charles's team refused to correct it. When William and Harry went directly to their father and told him what his communications team was doing, Charles shouted at them and told William he was being paranoid. William was not paranoid. He was watching clearly, filing everything away and waiting for the day he had the standing to respond. The arrangement with Annabelle ran from the same playbook, and beneath even that arrangement was something harder to absorb. Long before the interior design contract existed, back when Charles was still married to Diana and the affair with Camilla needed to stay hidden, they had somewhere to go: a quiet country house in Dorset, in the village of Storpane. Annabelle's house, isolated, private, invisible from public attention, that was where they met weekend after weekend. Annabelle provided the space, the cover, and the protection. Years later, after everything had surfaced, after Diana was gone, Annabelle was drawing a salary from the estate connected to Diana's son, paid from the same institution tied to Diana's legacy. When William finally had the authority to act, no meeting was called, no letter was sent, and no public statement was made. He simply waited for the Duchy of Cornwall to publish its routine annual financial accounts, a document almost nobody outside royal financial circles ever opens, a dry technical record of income, expenses, and staffing. This time Annabelle Elliott's name was missing. 20 years of royal employment ended without a single word said publicly. What that removal actually meant becomes clear only when you understand what those 2 decades had produced. Annabelle was genuinely talented, and her reputation reflected it. In 2014, she ranked 5th among the most influential female interior designers in the United Kingdom. 12 holiday cottages on the Isles of Scilly carried her work: Balmoral Castle, the Llanywrmod estate in Wales, and a converted barn at Dumfries House in Ayr, Scotland, which became a lavish guest house for weddings and private events, all bore her imprint. For nearly 20 years, her designs ran through some of the most significant properties in the entire royal collection. None of it mattered. Royal expert Emmy Griffiths chose careful language when describing the situation, saying William had taken Annabelle off the payroll since becoming Duke of Cornwall and that it had caused some ripples. The official line was that the decision reflected nothing about the quality of her work. A separate royal source was far less guarded. That source said William's move sent a message that he wanted to cut away the royal hangers-on and reduce the spending his father had built up during his tenure managing the duchy. Cut away the royal hangers-on. That phrase is the one that matters. That is what William thought of the arrangement Camilla's family had been drawing income from for 2 decades. At the same time, Annabel's name disappeared from the payroll. William was filling the duchy with people he had selected himself. Harry Aubrey Fletcher and William Pentcutsum, both personal friends and godparents to Prince George and Prince Louis, came in. No explanation was required. Camilla's family went out, and William's people came in. Every position Charles had placed with someone from his world was now being reviewed. On paper, the financial cost was small. Annabel had been earning somewhere between roughly £20,000 and £82,000 per year. Against a $1.2 billion estate, that figure is almost nothing. The symbolism, though, landed like a weight everyone inside the royal family felt. It told Camilla that her family's access to the crown was not a permanent condition. It signaled that the transition from Charles's era to William's had already begun quietly and without ceremony, and the duchy payroll was not the only front. Every year at Christmas, the royal family gathers at Sandringham. Camilla decided to invite her son, Tom Parker Bowles, her child from her first marriage, to the family Christmas there. Word came out that William had made his position clear. He would not attend the main Christmas lunch if Tom was present. Camilla invited Tom anyway. Tom confirmed to the Telegraph that his mother had personally asked him, telling him she had not had Christmas with him in a long time. Tom arrived. William did not go to the main gathering at the big house. He stayed with Kate and their children at Anmer Hall on the Sandringham estate and spent Christmas there instead. Camilla had just kept the future King of England away from his own family's Christmas at an estate he will one day own because she invited her son and refused to yield. That is not a minor family disagreement. That is a power struggle conducted over seating arrangements and a Christmas lunch. Then, in September 2025, something happened in public that made the tension between them impossible to miss. During Donald Trump's state visit to Windsor Castle, Kate had fallen into warm, easy conversation with Melania Trump. From the side, Camilla stepped in. What followed lasted only a second but shifted the entire moment. Camilla raised her hand and made a short, firm motion toward Kate. Body language expert Judy James described it without softening. It looked like she was pulling rank, almost shooing her away. The clip traveled fast. Millions replayed it, slowed it down, and watched it again because what it showed was genuinely uncomfortable. The Queen appeared to be dismissing the future Queen in public, in front of world leaders. Behind closed doors. One source said the reaction hit William hard. That was not just awkward, that crossed a line. This was no longer a private disagreement. It was a public signal sent in front of the entire world. Behind all of it, something even more significant was quietly taking shape. King Charles, still fighting cancer, had begun having personal conversations with William about what would happen after he was gone. One insider described the tone as urgent. Leave Camilla alone. Protect her. Do not push her out. A dying king spending whatever time remained trying to secure his wife's future by appealing directly to the one person with the power to take it away. William's answer came not in words but in a Christmas he declined to attend and in the names he placed on a duchy payroll. The removal of Annabel and the standoff over Christmas were the parts that could be seen. The move Camilla understood at the deepest level, the one that would shape the rest of her life, had nothing to do with the payroll. It had everything to do with 4 walls and a roof, because William had not only inherited an estate. He had inherited the homes she walked through every day and called her own. Camilla's position appears solid from the outside. She moves between Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Sandringham, and Balmoral. She holds the title Her Majesty the Queen. She serves as patron or president of more than 90 charities. From any distance, the arrangement looks permanent, and every single element of it is tied to one man who has cancer. Here is the part most people miss entirely. Sandringham House in Norfolk and Balmoral Castle in Scotland are not government property. No royal institution manages them. Both are privately owned, the same way a family home is privately owned. Elizabeth II inherited both from her father, King George VI. When she died in September 2022, they passed directly to Charles. When Charles dies, they pass directly to William. Balmoral sits at roughly $140 million. Sandringham comes in at about $65 million, together more than $200 million in private property that Camilla currently moves through, sleeps in, and calls home. None of it belongs to her in any legal document that exists anywhere. Balmoral carries a weight no dollar figure can capture. William was 15 years old and staying there with Harry in August 1997 when their father came to their rooms before dawn to tell them their mother had died. Diana had been killed in a car crash in Paris. Those two boys walked the grounds of Balmoral that morning trying to survive something no child should face, and the detail that sits under all of it quietly is this. When the news reached Charles from Paris, the first person he called was not the Queen, who was also at Balmoral. The first person he called was Camilla. She told him Diana would be fine, then he called back with the news that she was gone. Camilla knew before his sons were even awake. She walks those same grounds now as Queen. William will own them. The transfer happens instantly when Charles dies, precisely as it did in 2022 when William became Duke of Cornwall. William becomes king, Kate becomes queen, and Camilla loses the title the Queen entirely because it passes to Kate. She would most likely become Queen Dowager, the widow of a king. It is not a shameful designation, but it is a step back the entire world will clock. Her title carries no protection from birth. Royal by marriage only, what she is called after Charles dies will rest entirely with William. Charles stripped Diana of her title. Her Royal Highness, after their divorce. William was there for that. He watched it happen to his mother. He knows precisely how the mechanism works. Whether Camilla continues to live in Sandringham or Balmoral will rest entirely on what William decides. No legal protection guarantees her access. She will be a guest if he extends that courtesy. And that is where the decision she made years ago becomes the thing she cannot undo. Camilla once had a piece of property that was entirely hers. Ray Mill House, a private home in Wiltshire she had owned before she ever married Charles. She talked about the garden there with real warmth, calling it the best therapy in the world. It was her ground, her retreat, the place she could close the door and simply exist outside the weight of royal life. Then she sold it. The reason given was that she wanted to commit fully to her royal life and her role beside Charles. The consequence of that choice is permanent. When Charles dies, Camilla will have no private property anywhere that belongs to her. She will live wherever William decides she lives. The woman who spent 20 years working her way to the top of the most powerful family in Britain, who managed the press, shaped what Charles heard about his own sons, planted stories that damaged her stepsons, kept the future king from his own family Christmas, and dismissed the future queen in public in front of the entire world. Now depends completely on the goodwill of the man she helped push out of his own family home. She built the trap. She walked into it with her eyes open.